Hello guys, welcome back to the program. Let's be honest. If questioning how the Sheriff's Office spends taxpayer money is considered an attack, then accountability no longer exists. This isn't personal, it's about comparing experience and qualifications as a challenger to the current administration. I have spent my career managing large law enforcement budgets, leading complex organizations, and being held accountable, certainly for results. There were no excuses. I know what responsibility is, I know what responsible oversight looks like. Budgets are not political documents. They are operational roadmaps. They show whether leadership is driving strategy or just simply maintaining systems that no longer work. You may know them as the status quo. You've heard that many, many times before. And a lot of people say, well, you want to be careful not to attack the incumbent or the current administration, and it's not an attack. As a challenger, I have vowed not to run a smear campaign, but I never said that we wouldn't run a factual campaign. And if I'm going to be the candidate for the sheriff's office, it is important for me to examine the budget and tell you how I can do it better. While I examine the budget, I'm not looking for headlines. I'm not looking for even answers. Are resources actually reducing crime? Are we funding supervision and training or just growing line items? Are we measuring outcomes, or are we simply spending because that's how it's always done or because the boss wants it? I'll tell you this. These things really are important, and it's my responsibility as a candidate to convince you to vote for me and to tell you how I can do it better. Certainly in my career as the police chief of the city of Mobile, I didn't get the luxury of avoiding hard questions. Every dollar had to be justified. Every division had to be performed. And when something wasn't working, well, we had to fix it. My friends, that's real leadership. And if I'm going to be the candidate for the next Mobile County Sheriff with your vote, it is my responsibility to convince you how I can do it better. Comparing budgets isn't disrespectful. It's necessary. If the current approach is working, it should stand up to scrutiny. If it isn't, then the public deserves certainly a better plan. My plan is simple and it's proven. Spend with purpose, track performance, and hold command staff accountable for those expenditures and certainly responsible for the line items that we either have to purchase or spend. Treat every taxpayer dollar with the same discipline we demand from our deputies in the field. And a lot of times, you heard on prior episodes, we spend so much money in government. It's commonly known that I've said it's the most efficient and effective organization on the planet. And that's because, unfortunately, people are elected into office, and sometimes they just don't necessarily have either the experience, the qualifications, or even the education to run such. This election isn't about protecting titles, it's about protecting the public. Strong leadership doesn't hide from comparison, it invites it. Because real accountability isn't a campaign tactic, it's a requirement of the job. And so I understand in the world of campaign, and certainly in the world of people being friends with the incumbent or being even friends with me, I have a public record that anyone can go and look at. I want to talk a little bit about the comparisons between the current administration of the Sheriff's Office and mine. And below is going to be a clean, concise graph that will explain to you simply my approach, my theory, my philosophy, and certainly it's evidence-based on comparison of when I was the chief of police for the city of Mobile versus the current Sheriff's Office budget. My record compared to the current administration of the Sheriff's Office. I've managed at least approximately 750 employees with a $75 million a year budget with structured oversight, command, accountability, and certainly measurable outcomes. If we take a look at the Sheriff's Office, it has increased some 85, nearly 86% over the last 4 years, and it's went from 57 million to 106 million during that time frame under the current administration. Budget growth without clear public benchmarks that's tied to outcomes. You haven't seen an influx of deputies or correction officers or operators or dispatchers. We certainly hadn't seen, or maybe we have seen, maybe some of the older vehicles in the fleet. We don't know what the money's being spent on. I'm sure there's a plan in place over there. All we get to simply see is the budget that is allocated to the Sheriff's Department, but we don't necessarily get to see the budget within the Sheriff's Department. Fiscal discipline, the 3 fiscal years I was the chief, we stayed under budget while expanding operational effectiveness. And what that really means is while we return money back to the city coffers every single year that I was the chief, we still had start reductions to 3 years, respectively. And then, of course, if you go over to the Sheriff's Office, spending levels not consistently tied to performance metrics that we're aware of. Crime reduction was achieved at the city of Mobile. With the police department, we had double-digit crime reduction virtually in every category of Part 1 crimes, and certainly a 65% reduction in homicides. Over at the Sheriff's Office, crime trends are not clearly tied to strategic budget outcomes. And you've heard me say, and it's not castigating doubt or dispersions. What we're simply saying is that is one of the measures and metrics used to essentially grade an organization and its leadership in particular with the crime data, crime report, and we just don't see that certainly with the sheriff's department. Results in 2023, the city of Mobile, we had the single lowest crime reduction year at 17.5%, and that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you add in the numerous amount of cases from larcenies, that was very significant in the city of Mobile to the extent that it was the single best crime reduction year since 1988. We go to the sheriff's department. There's no comparable historic crime reduction that has been presented. We talk about accountability. The command staff held responsible for results, not just activity. I've often said that the Mobile Police Department is the big show in town when you look at its mere size, budget, and responsibility. And the staff over there, in many regards, does a lot of things very well. It's a well-oiled machine. And, of course, over here at the Sheriff's Department, it's limited transparency on performance-based accountability. We don't know. We don't have the crime numbers, or we don't have access to the internal budget of operations or functionality within the Sheriff's Office. Maybe it's got to be somewhere. I mean, they have it. I've just not been able to find it. And certainly being a candidate, I don't want to reach out to the Sheriff's Department and ask for it because I think that may look adversarial on my part. Budget philosophy. My philosophy is simply spend with purpose, align dollars to crime reduction, training, supervision, and deployment. While we don't really know what the philosophy over there, it just seems that the budget, no doubt, has increased, but we don't know the justification of why that budget has increased. You look at transparency, regular review of expenditures, audits, and we welcome questions that were answered either who we had to report to the mayor's office or even down to the staff that were doing the constant monitoring and oversight, certainly of the budget. And then, of course, we don't see budget scrutiny over at the sheriff's office, or rather it's treated politically rather than operationally. And I don't think there's anything political about a budget. And when we talk about the sheriff's office, we got to remember, to make sure that, the correction officers, are they being well compensated? Do they have the equipment needs that they have? And certainly the 911 operators and dispatchers, those things are very important when it comes to transparency. And then, of course, the leadership approach. For me, I'm a data guy. I'm data driven, outcome focused, willing to make hard decisions, to even tell the guys, listen, we may have to forego asking for raises this year, until we can get some capital needs met if we need to move or transfer money from one cost center to the next. And then, of course, it seems to be just the status quo management and reactive budgeting functions at the sheriff's office. But that's what it appears to me. Now, prior to the current administration, who is in the first term of that administration, prior to that was the previous sheriff. And then when you look at the previous 4 or 5 years of his administration, while he had increases year over year, they were very incremental, if you will. They wasn't 20, 30, 40%, maybe, I think, in what we've seen during the last 4 years. And to me, that's problematic. And then, of course, public trust, emphasize on stewardship of taxpayer dollars as a moral obligation. You've heard me rail, I think, in many regards in the campaign that we as leaders should be a good steward of the people's money. It's our money. And we don't see those taxes a lot of times because if it's property tax, it comes out of escrow. Majority of the time, if it's taxes, on sales at the store, you just know you're going to get taxes, cigarette tax, alcohol tax, gas tax. Double taxation is no doubt a big problem in this country, and it's just never enough to feed the government. But yet we'll elect people, and many times, many times we just elect people because we like a smile, we think they're nice people, or maybe they did something for us. Maybe they helped us out on a situation or an incident, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're good leaders. And we always need to have the mindset as government officials that can we do more with less? And it sounds good to say it, but virtually, I'll just be frank with you, it's not a practice in government service. I think in many regards because it's not the elected officials' money, and that can become problematic. But when you compare public trust, from my position of being a good steward, it just seems like public confidence is strained by lack of clear financial explanations. Now, I want you to understand that while some of this information come public, there are a lot of media outlets that are on some of our social media pages, and yet we've not heard anything about it. And it doesn't matter to me if they pick it up, it doesn't pick it up. You don't see many political candidates or even public officials come to you in this way, and certainly in this regard, certainly in my opinion, because, the things I'm telling you today are and could be held against me going forward if I don't do the things down the road should I be elected. If I don't continue those things and tell you or make those commitments or promises made to you and I don't keep it, you have some type of evidence to come back, throw it into my face, put it in the media and say, hey, you said you would do this, but you're not going to do that. I am that serious about leadership when it comes to using taxpayer dollars rather than being enriched for myself. It's just certainly my opinion. And and I think it's a valid opinion personally, but we'll go ahead and continue. All right, so we'll go ahead and just finish up, and thank you for allowing me to go through some of the graphs there, or at least some of the comparisons. But government does not have a revenue problem. It has an oversight problem. Every dollar spent by government comes from you, the people, from families, from small businesses, from men and women who expect their leaders to be responsible stewards, and certainly not careless managers. We talked about all the double taxation and the different ways that we're taxed, and we really don't think about how hard we work. But yet, there are good things that have been done. Roads are being built, certainly. Venues are being built, lighting being repaired, and those things are important. But proper oversight of government budgets is not political. My opinion, it's moral. It's about trust. And once trust is broken, it is incredibly hard to restore. Oversight means asking hard questions. It means demanding clear answers. And it means never assuming that good intentions are enough. You can have the best intentions, but when it comes to cost to the taxpayer who's out there working day in and day out, good intentions mean absolutely nothing. Because history tells us something I think is very important. Where oversight is weak, accountability disappears. And where accountability disappears, fraud, abuse, waste move in. And, I've given you the examples before, and I've heard those examples. Well, we're going to spend $80,000, $90,000 on an SUV. Well, that's nothing. Can we get it cheap? Don't worry about it. In the grand scheme of the budget, it's peanuts. And we should never have that attitude. If we couldn't afford to go out and buy that same vehicle on our own, we shouldn't have that attitude with the people's money. But this does not happen overnight. It happens slowly, quietly, and once unchecked, expense at a time. Budgets grow, transparency shrinks, and suddenly no one can explain where the money went. And they certainly can't tell you why. And it's a lack of accountability that creates a dangerous culture, a culture where people stop fearing consequences, where corners get cut, and where this is how we've always done it certainly becomes the excuse. My position has always been that when I talk about corruption, it's not always criminal. It's really not. Sometimes it's just turning a blind eye or for things like wasteful spending and people not calling out and saying, well, maybe we shouldn't do that. Listen, that culture doesn't just waste money. It damages public confidence. And once the public believes their government is careless or corrupt, that damage is lasting. And it comes from you, the taxpayer. And when it's no longer enough, property crime votes come about. Yeah, we're going to raise your property taxes. Property taxes go up because politicians say we need more money. Let's raise an incremental lodging tax. We did that not too long ago in the city of Mobile. Oversight is not about micromanaging, but it is about leadership. And it's about setting expectations, establishing controls, and making it clear that every dollar must have a purpose and certainly a paper trail. Good leaders do not fear audits. They welcome them because audits protect the organization, the employees, and the public. The sheriff recently said that he's had, many audits, or at least an audit, and it came back fine, but we have no idea what metrics was used in that audit. We have absolutely no way of knowing, but I didn't question it. I just said that at the end of the day, the budget went up 84% or some $50 million in 4 years. Listen, fraud thrives in darkness and abuse thrives in silence. Oversight brings both of those issues into sight. And responsibility certainly means understanding that budgets are not abstract documents. They are promises to the people, the taxpayer, promises to employees who are looking for raises, promises to employees who expect that they don't have to jump a patrol car off at 6 o'clock in the morning and get their wife out of bed to come put jumping cables and help them out. Listen, promises to future generations of citizens in our county. These things are important. And when leaders fail to monitor spending, when they ignore red flags, when they look the other way, they are not being flexible. They are being negligent. They are abdicating, certainly, their responsibility. And negligence, certainly in government, always costs more in the long run, but all they do is go back to the coffers and take more money from you, the taxpayer. Do we need a Doge in Mobile? One of the best things Trump ever did, in my opinion, was implement Doge, that accountability, and then we've seen the fraud and the wasteful spending. True accountability requires courage, and courage to say no, courage to challenge internal pressure, courage to confront waste even when it's uncomfortable. It also requires consistency. Oversight cannot be selective. It cannot depend on who is involved or how politically convenient it is. I know I'm talking about a lot of things that many people probably hadn't thought much about, but do these, with $50+ million over 4 years, is the current fleet in the sheriff's office being rotated out every 5 to 7 years? I think not. Not if deputies are having to jump vehicles off. I absolutely think not. Rules must apply to everyone, every department, every contract, every dollar, and yes, including the sheriff. Responsible oversight sends a powerful message. It tells the employees that integrity matters. It tells taxpayers their money is respected. And my friends, it tells the public that leadership takes its duty very serious. This is how trust is built, not through speeches, not through promises, but through disciplined, transparent action. Government should never operate on blind faith. It is not a barrier to progress. It is the foundation of progress, because when accountability is strong, when fraud is rooted out, when abuse is addressed swiftly, government works better for everyone. Because it's out of sight, out of mind, generally lends itself to fraud, abuse of the people's money. And that is the responsibility of leadership, to protect the public trust, to guard every dollar, and to never forget who the money really belongs to. I would ask this question: have correction officers and operators, and certainly deputies, and certainly let's not forget even the civilians, not a select few of civilians maybe that works for the sheriff's office, but all civilians that work with the sheriff's department, to ensure that they're adequately being compensated. Deputies are not having to jump off vehicles, because at the end of the day, oversight is not about control. It's about character. You hear me talk a lot about character and integrity. It matters. And character is what separates good intentions from good governance. People are well-intended, but if they don't have the business and sense, and certainly the wherewithal to understand business principles, financial principles, then good governance will never happen. You know, I've got, or at least heard stories that, you know, maybe the finance people at the sheriff's office are not even properly educated. You know, they don't have the necessary experience or even the education or qualifications to serve in the role they have. Listen, this race isn't about politics as usual. It's about leadership. Leadership that understands how to manage people, resources, tax dollars with discipline and integrity. Leadership that does not fear scrutiny or accountability. That certainly comes from competence. Budgets matter because priorities matter. And when you've spent a career leading a large law enforcement organizations, working in that organization, coming up through that organization, learning the administrative and executive functions of an organization, managing hundreds of employees, overseeing millions of dollars, you learn one simple truth. Results don't happen by accident. They happen by being intentional. They happen when leaders demand accountability, they align spending with outcomes, and then they certainly refuse to accept the status quo when it no longer serves the public. My friends, that's why I am running for sheriff of Mobile County. Not to attack anyone, not to protect the title, but to bring proven leadership, fiscal responsibility, and certainly clear accountability to the office that belong to you, the people of Mobile County. Now, it may be said that some people will take this as an attack, and it's not meant to be that way. But how else are you going to get to know the philosophy of the candidate, how the candidate thinks, the leadership responsibility, how a leader carries themselves, and really what they truly believe, not what they just tell you in a campaign commercial that lasts no more than 30 to 60 seconds. This campaign is about trust. Trust that your sheriff will respect every dollar, support the men and women doing the job, and always, and you know, put public safety above politics. You've seen what happened. I put public safety before politics with the city. It's not popular, but it is a mandate. Listen, thank you so much for your time. If you like the podcast, please like, subscribe, and share. We really need to grow this program. We cannot depend on the media to get this information to you, because we need more people like you engaged in understanding certainly why I'm running for Mobile County Sheriff. You can also continue to email any questions you would like to see addressed on the podcast. We go through the emails daily. Thank you for all the compliments for everyone that's reached out to us. We believe in open dialogue and certainly transparency where we can be transparent. My friends, we'll see you on the next program, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise. God bless.